round of applause for both our guests. May I now request Dr. S. J. Shankar to deliver the keynote address.
Good evening and namaskar to all of you. Let me, first of all, begin by congratulating Shiv Khera ji on his new book. He is, of course, a veteran author, but I think the excitement of bringing out a new book is always unique. I am very confident. To me, it's no surprise that even before it officially gets released, it's already up there in the charts. I have one rule, which is never talk about a book you haven't read. So I think somewhere it should be added to his rules as well. So I had the pleasure of actually reading the book on my flight back from Washington. And I totally agree with Mr. Rajiv Bedi. It's a very easy read. It's very quintessentially Shiv Khera. You know, you get the ideas, impacts you, you remember the key points. And most important, you absorb the messages of the book. Now, before I share my own thoughts, let me start with a mild note of difference. The book, as you know, is called Live While You Are Alive. And it begins by saying, we only live once. I actually prefer the Ian Fleming version, which is we live twice. You only live twice. And you only live twice, if you all remember the song, once for yourself and once for your dreams. So what I want to say up front is that living for your dreams, that is really for all of us, you know. There is no human being who does not have an aspiration. And anybody with an aspiration, for them, self-improvement and self-help are the natural drivers of how to get more out of life and how to do better in life. And that, in many ways, is actually what this book is about, though it focuses on the stress aspect, and I'm delighted to be taken as a guinea pig of the stress management business. Now, my second point, of course, is that life is unpredictable to a considerable degree. That is where much of the stress comes from. But again, one of the messages in the book is that if you develop the confidence, it can be navigated, it can be managed. And the most important is that we all must try our best. That, you know, there's no guarantee that we will be successful in everything we do. But there could be a guarantee, if you motivate yourself, that you will do your best. And then beyond that, you know, it is in the hands of higher forces. Now, to do that, to do your best, you know, you have to take the risks. You have, as Mr. Khera says, you have to be at peace with yourself. You have to accept that mistakes will happen. But the key is not to fear the mistakes, but to recover from the mistakes, to rectify the mistakes. And, you know, prepare your best, but be ready for surprises. I mean, that, in a sense, is what is the life outlook, which I could, you know, sort of, I would say this was the nichod of the book. And I think that life outlook really for all of us in whatever we do, personally, professionally, organizationally, it is attitude which helps us develop the professional and life skills that we need. I would also add to that no one is perfect. Most of us, it's natural when you go out, somebody reads your CV, people normally talk about your success, or even you talk about your own success. You always tell people what you did. It would be very interesting if we paused for a moment and thought about where we did not do well. As I tell people, especially young people, I like to remember the exams I did not pass. And there are some I did, Most people obviously understand I passed the UPSC. But I can tell you, I sat for the IIT entrance exam and I didn't pass. And in fact, I had I must share with you a very interesting experience recently. I was at an event where someone went to the great trouble of getting my school report. They actually got my school report, got a copy of it, had a nice, presentable version of it. And they were under the mistaken impression that it would be a good report. So here I am, and they introduce me, and they say, we have your school report. And then they flip page 1. And, it wasn't that great. They saved me the embarrassment. So they read the final teacher's remarks saying the boy has great potential if he works a little bit harder. I mean, that's what the teachers say when you don't do that well. So I remember that, and I remind, everybody around me saying, look, all of us somewhere, I'm sure there were some people who were so talented very early on that anything they did, anything they touched turned out to be wonderful. But I think for the vast majority of us, there were some things which worked, some things which didn't. There were days you did well, there were days you didn't. There were some things you passed, there were some which you didn't. And I think that's important to remember in life, because that is very much, part of that attitude towards life, that sense that, you should not be down, you should not feel sort of bad at any setback, and you should be optimistic about the continuous self-improvement which all of us practice and certainly aspire to. Now, as an external affairs minister, and as you can see, an extreme case of stress, there were some takeaways I had. I read the book, I absorbed the book, and I asked myself, okay, so what is it in my own sphere, in my own domain I experienced? And try to put it down in a Shiv Khera-esque way to communicate to people. And for me, when I look at my own particular responsibility now, but even earlier as a diplomat, I have, over a period of time, tried to aspire to the 3 C's of success. One, of course, is contact. The more people you know, the greater your reach. The second C is chemistry, which is that if you get along with people, they are more likely to do things for you than if you don't. And the third is credibility, that if you are known to be good on your word, when you say things, when you make promises, when you tell people what can be done or what cannot be done, people take you seriously. A lot of people would do things, they would do things first if you know them. 2, they will certainly do things if they like you, therefore the chemistry. But most of all, they are likely to respond to you if they believe you are straight, you are upfront, what you say is what you get. I think That is a very, very crucial attribute, certainly in the world of diplomacy. My second takeaway, and there were elements of it in the book, I would call it today, because we are in the era of art of the deal, I would call it the art of parachuting, which is you drop into a place and get to know as quickly as you can what it is all about. And that's what most, certainly in diplomacy, in the foreign service, as a foreign minister, that's what a lot of us do. You have, a little time to get your bearings, understand where you have landed, try to learn what everybody around you is about. And you can say, in a way, it's a kind of Atmanirbharta, that you are carrying all those skills which you get by reading Shiv Khera, and then you drop down in a place and you apply those skills as quickly as you can. The third is crucial, central to this, which is stress. And in fact, he says, whatever you do, avoid chronic stress. Now, avoiding chronic stress and being a minister don't go together. So that's the reality of the situation. So what do you do? And that's what we were talking as we walked into this building. And I said, look, my most honest answer is you normalize the abnormal. You build your life around it. You de-stress it by making it, in a way, your part of your life. So if your phone rings at 2 o'clock, you answer it and go back to sleep, and get up at 6 or 7 and try to remember and hope what you said was right. So how do, you actually, because there are people, there are situations, sometimes there are professions, sometimes it's your mindset, you take on responsibility. There are people who take the weight of an organization or the responsibilities of a family or a larger grouping on themselves. So they take stress away from others onto themselves. And such people do carry chronic stress with them. So you carry chronic stress really by, in a way, building your life around it. I wouldn't recommend it to other people if you don't have to do it. But that's the way to do it. And of course, a lot of the other points which Shiv Khera ji makes about being optimistic, about staying the course, about developing the fortitude for tough times, I think these are really very important attributes. But for me, the 6 crucial takeaways from this book, which I certainly have sought to build into my lifestyle. One is that you plan for the unplanned. 2, you invest in relationships. 3, and this is not just a political statement, it is also a political statement, but it is also a personal statement, no appeasement. 4, equally important, I think in politics also, no toxicity. 5, respect time. And 6, most important, get a good night's sleep. So these are 6 straight chapters out of your book, which I think are really very sensible advice offered to people who may be very stressed or may not be stressed. You won't be stressed certainly if you follow all these things. Now, let me conclude with a few words about my own experience, 41 years in diplomacy as a professional, 6 years now running as a minister. So what has been the MEA's experience which I have seen in terms of stress management? Okay. And I'd like to share some recent experiences. One, I would say, and I'm looking at some very distinguished people in front of me, the discipline of duty. When you believe something is your duty and you are trained to do that, and there is a discipline which comes out of it, you are not stressed because one, you believe you should be doing it, and two, you are habituated, you are trained to do it. So when I think of the power of this habit, of this discipline, you know, my most, I would say, insightful, perceptive experience in all these years that I'm talking about was actually the period of the COVID. It was the period of the COVID because most people started work from home. In the Ministry of External Affairs, because we were trying to get back Indians from all over the world and deal with them, we actually moved from a morning to evening routine, from that into a 3-shift routine, which was actually more people came to work every day. So it was, for us, instead of work from home, it was go home occasionally. But we dealt with the COVID by actually moving to a 3-shift ministries, having a 24-hour operational culture to, you know, whether it was somebody who was stuck, whether it was an oxygen shipment that was needed, whether it was a ventilator requirement somewhere else. But I saw at that time what discipline does, what a sense of duty does, that to ask people who were afraid, you know, as all of us reasonably were, people were afraid to come out of their homes. You are asking them every day to come to office, to sit with a group of other people, to do this day after day, and they did it. The second was, I saw what motivation could do. When the COVID started, you all remember that initial, you know, that first focus on Wuhan, the city in China. Now, we had young diplomats who actually volunteered to go into Wuhan to get people out. That is the power of motivation. That for them, I mean, they could have stayed away, they could have ducked. They knew somebody had to go in with a plane, and they were willing to do that. So what you can get people, if there is personal motivation, organizational motivation, if that is the culture, people will be willing to go the extra mile and more to get things done. The third lesson I saw was one of no risks, no rewards. Which, by the way, no risks means you have to take on some stress. And I've seen this on a kind of a transactional basis regularly, but there were some very difficult situations. You know, when we did evacuations in Ukraine, or when we did one in Sudan, you know, there were people working in the embassy, there were people working in the foreign ministry who took personal risks. Either they were there in that country. I mean, in the case of Sudan, for example, I had to literally shout at my ambassador to get him out, because he was unwilling to come out till everybody was out. And in the case of Ukraine, I had actually people volunteering to go to the most difficult spot, which was at that time the most chaotic place in the fighting, who, you know, when they went there, actually the Ukrainians thought they were crazy, because everybody else was coming out of that zone of fighting, and these two gentlemen were going into the zone of fighting. So, but we could not have got the job done if we had not taken the risk. So, as I say, at the end of the day, no risk, no reward. Then, this point, being there at the right time. Today, you know, recently we had a summit of Caribbean countries, Caribbean islands. Prime Minister had gone to Guyana. So all the Caribbean, I think 15 countries there. Every one of them began by thanking Prime Minister Modi for the vaccines. Not just because they got the vaccines, because that being there at the right time, that when the rest of the world, when there were countries next to them, there were big developed countries who had cornered 8 times the vaccine of their population. And next to them, or close by, were islands who needed 20,000 doses, 30,000 doses, and didn't get them. So when you do something for somebody at the right time, it could be small, it could be big, but the timing is crucial. I mean, I've dealt with Sri Lanka for a very, very long time. I don't know if any of you in the last 2 years have had an opportunity to go there. The average Sri Lankan remembers this, that when their economy was falling off a cliff, we stepped up, most importantly at the right time. That our aid, which was huge, $4 billion plus, but more importantly, it came at the right time. Because the IMF was still negotiating, others were saying, okay, we will look at it. As you know, the fall of their economy was checked because we came in at the right time. Then I would say it's important to move with the times. You know, we see this every day in governance. This, for example, is an aspirational India. It's a more prosperous India. People want to travel more. When I joined the government, you know, getting a passport seemed like a privilege. Okay. In fact, in the colony I lived, most people said, okay, somebody has joined the foreign ministry, uska matlab hai ki hamara passport ka kaam ho jayega. This was the community value of this. But you can't do that anymore. You know, the average Indian is not willing to put up with stuff which they did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. So how do you move with the times? That too, I think, is important. And we have tried to do that, you know. I sometimes read about rankings. You know, there's a passport ranking. Now, most rankings, I mean, have a, it's like a, you know, setting hota hai. Huh? So it's fixed for some purpose, okay? So they will tell you things like, you know, we see how many countries you can go without a visa. That's one metric, okay? Now, obviously, you know, we are a large country, so a lot of other countries feel, okay, maybe these guys, it's better to have a visa system. But look at the kind of metrics which today are so important. Which other country rescues its people in places like Ukraine or Sudan or Israel or Afghanistan? Because in Ukraine, I can tell you, even the Western countries told their people, sorry guys, I mean, the war has started, now you're on your own, we told you to leave, and there's nothing we can do. So, today, you know, we have a system for anybody whose passport is lost, anybody who has a grievance, that the wages are not paid. Somebody unfortunately passes away abroad. You know, how many countries bring back the bodies of their nationals who pass away abroad? How many countries have homes for, you know, the people who go out to work professionally, whose remittances are so helpful for our economy? You know, we have today, we even support people in fighting court cases abroad if they don't have the means to do that. But this is today the expectation. You know, this is the aspirational India. People are going out into the global workplace, but they expect to be supported by the government and by the country. So it's important to move with times, that the need to adapt, the need to change, you know, I mean, life is less stressful, more efficient, if actually, as a governance outlook also, we accept, and that's really one of the big changes to my mind in the last 10 years, that the many things which would have been accepted before. Today we need to make that effort and bring up the system to speed, because today that is the legitimate expectation of the average citizen. Two other takeaways I had. One, the importance of trust and teamwork. And to trust, to have a team, you must trust. And to trust, you must know the people. So anybody who heads an organization, if you do not know actually means personally know enough people, it's very difficult to build that culture of trust, in which case your team will always be suboptimal. So it's important to take interest in people. Sometimes, in this era we need to say it, because often we look at the screen and we don't have enough human relationships. So I say this, that, era of technology, know your colleagues, know your employees, know your superiors, know everybody around you, take an interest in their lives. But this is actually a huge asset if you are heading an organization. And finally, of course, know what you don't know. Because all of us like to give gyan. I was part of talk about a book only if you read it. But know what you don't know. But equally important, know somebody who does. So go find somebody smarter than you, better informed than you. You cannot know everything, but if you know Mr. Shiv Khera, you've got a great start in life. So thank you very much.